Some people just don't know how to stay out of trouble. Or maybe some people like being trouble. Maybe it's part of their identity. Imagine you become a multi-millionaire rap label executive. You're hanging out with the most legendary rappers like Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre. You're meeting every celebrity you ever dreamed of and signing the biggest checks. And on top of that, everyone respects you. You've got it all. You wouldn't do anything crazy, right? Well, you probably wouldn't do anything crazy, but that's why I'm talking about Marion Hugh Suge Knight. See, Suge co-founded Death Row Records, and he changed the lives of so many people. But he also used intimidation, extortion, and violence to get anything and everything that he wanted. His motto was by any means necessary. Suge had finally lost it. I mean, behind the scenes, he was going crazy for years, but this time, in public, in broad daylight, on camera. He had taken the life of one man, severely injured another, and gotten himself a 28-year prison sentence. But this is such an interesting story because it doesn't just all end on this night in 2015. This story had been unraveling for years with an incredibly prominent list of characters, one of which was somebody who wasn't just gonna back down if Suge got in his face. He had fought too hard in his life to get here. He was gonna stand up to Suge Knight's out-of-control behavior and ultimately help change the course of Death Row Records forever. In 2018, a Los Angeles judge sentenced Suge Knight to 28 years in prison after a fatal hit and run. This was the end of one of the craziest executive careers in hip-hop ever. Through a lot of the 90s, Death Row Records was the home to some of the biggest stars in hip-hop. It was like one of the #1 records, and Suge was the co-founder. He was the muscle, he was the decision maker, and he was a lot of people's friend, I guess. Maybe. We'll get to that. Suge was coming into award shows with gold chains, diamonds, puffing on a cigar. Look, I'm gonna tell y'all right now, if I made it that far, I'm not gonna mess up. Look, this is what black folks dream of, okay? We are all just working for a little bit of money and a little bit of power. But when we get to that level, we're gonna be minding our P's and Q's, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about how did Suge get to this point? How did this happen? I mean, it was always happening behind the scenes, but to me, he just couldn't control himself. This is who he was. He was a violent man. Suge was born April 19th in 1965 in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods. He had 2 other siblings, and most of the things I saw about his parents, they were pretty good, quiet people. But the problem was that Suge grew up in a very violent neighborhood right after the Watts riots. It was some of the city's worst riots up until the Rodney King riots in the 90s later. So Suge gets born in April, and then this happens in August. The Watts riots happened after what people believe to be was police brutality. Look, a lot of the videos I saw, like news reports on the Watts riots from back in the day, I'm just gonna take them with a grain of salt because the reporters were saying stuff like, any white man that comes in these neighborhoods is fair game for these black people. I was like, yo, no wonder people were scared back in the day. If you watch the news reports with the audio off, you'll at least see what's going on. And to me, it looks like a war zone. It was a literal war zone. I mean, there's a lot of people that grew up in rough neighborhoods, but if you grew up in this time, you basically grew up in war. I mean, he was a baby when it happened, and the Watts riots only lasted a few days, but the lasting effects on the community afterwards, that was the environment that he grew up in. When I was researching this case, one thing that I thought was really interesting was Suge describes this account where he first saw somebody get murdered when he was 5 years old. Apparently they were killed because some guy thought he was talking to his girl, something like that. In my eyes, there's a difference between a child that witnesses death, a child that witnesses murder, and a child that witnesses cold-blooded murder. Kind of puts something in your head of like, well, which person do you want to be? Do you want to be the person holding the gun or the person on the other side of the gun? It's a survival mechanism that gets very deeply ingrained in you from the beginning. See, this was so interesting because he grew up with both parents. A lot of kids in his neighborhood, they had one parent or they didn't have any parent. And so they were all joining gangs, doing drugs, selling drugs. Suge actually grew up in one of the nicer houses in the neighborhood. I mean, you know, they had 2 bedrooms, they had both parents in the house. A lot of these kids, they grew up with no parents, one parent, one sibling. It was all, the family issues in this neighborhood were a big mess. And Suge was kind of given a blessing. Even though his parents weren't doing the best financially or mentally, given their surroundings, he didn't come from a super duper messed up home. But the neighborhood is, you know, drugs, violence, gangs. I mean, that was just the normal in Compton. I want to reiterate one more time that he believed the whole world was like this. He believed the whole world was like Compton. And even if he had big dreams of getting out, he felt like he was going to have to operate the same way he did in Compton in the outside world. See, I told y'all, that is scary as hell. And there's mad motherfuckers out here that operate like that. A whole bunch of them. Also, I just want to apologize if you guys saw the beginning of this and thought this was like a super, super high production documentary. I mean, it is. Like, don't get me wrong. The editing, the everything we have here, like, this is great. But you're going to get a lot of my commentary. If you don't hate that, you can subscribe to the channel. If you hate that, okay. So you're probably wondering, where does the name Suge come from? I mean, his name was Marion, right? His dad used to call him Suge because he said that he was sweet like a sugar bear. His dad thought his son was just the nicest boy. I mean, probably saw all the gang activity going on in the neighborhood. And he said, son, don't be like that. I want you to be sweet. I want you to be a nice boy. I mean, they saw him as kind of the big teddy bear personality. He was a big guy. I tried to dig a little bit into his parents' history, and by all accounts, his dad was a pretty nice guy. He worked in the laundry department at UCLA. He used to sing in an R&B group. Later on, he got a job as a truck driver, but Suge always witnessed his dad not having enough money to even buy a beer sometimes when he just wanted to unwind and relax. And he said, man, my dad is the nicest guy. He's the kindest guy. Now, I don't want to end up like that. I don't just want to be sweet like a sugar bear and have people walk all over me. Later on, in an interview with Esquire, he told them that he didn't want to end up like his dad. He made up his mind that he wanted everything and nothing would stop him. As he got older, I mean, remember I said he was kind of a big guy and he came from a well-to-do family. He didn't have to join any gangs. A lot of times in neighborhoods like this, kids almost have to join a gang because that's their family now. We all need a source of family. Sometimes you find it online. Sometimes you find it within yourself, or sometimes you do find it within your community, a church, your own family, something like that. Human beings need, or at least want, to feel supported. And joining these gangs gives you family, and it also gives you protection. If somebody wrongs you, you call your boys, you know? If somebody, you know, does something wrong and you have your family to lean on, you lean on them for emotional support. I don't know if they were leaning on each other for emotional support in the Bloods, but, you know, they came through when they needed to, right? That was their form of family. Well, Suge already had a family. And he just didn't give off that air that he needed security and support from these gangs, so he never needed to join one. In fact, he became a football star at Linwood High School. And he later on said in an interview, I didn't have to join any gangs. They were my friends. Like, dude, he gamed the system. I don't know what it was. I don't know if he like had confidence with having his own family or just he was a big guy and they're like, well, you know, we ain't gonna mess with that. Like, I have no idea, but he was fine. He had the support of the football team. He had the school saying, oh, this is such a great guy. Let's get him a scholarship. He had his family supporting him. Suge was fine. He was fine. But he still witnessed violence as a child. He witnessed it all over the neighborhood. I wonder how many times Suge heard of or witnessed a murder in his life or was involved before the age of 18. We'll never know, but I really firmly believe that this violence was normalized to him. This to him is just the way the world works. Whether he was involved in murders or just witnessed them, He did say later on that it was a normal occurrence for him to go through the pockets of dead men looking for something. And look, I know he wasn't just stumbling on bodies. People always describe Suge as a good kid. This really makes me feel like he had these split personas, right? He had his tough persona that gave him a lot of respect, you know, when he's out in the streets, hanging out with all these people. And then at home, he's sweet like a sugar bear, just like his dad told him to be. He also puts on that persona in school, but he still has this dark side, and it's growing. By college, he was 6'2" and 265 pounds. He was a very aggressive player. He said that when he was playing on the field, he would make bets about how many dudes he was gonna hurt. He said he liked the contact. He enjoyed the hitting. He enjoyed the violence. You know, it was an opportunity for him to take off that sweet boy mask and just kind of take out all of his raw aggression on the field while acting like he was just playing the sport. In one interview, this is crazy to me. He said that he enjoyed feeling the skin under his nails when he would attack somebody on the field. Bro, dude, to him, violence is power. Violence is power. And in his world, power is safety. Power is respect. There's a lot of themes that are going to get tied here to power. Here's another quote. In football, I play defense and they play offense. At the time, they're my enemy. They're trying to block me. I do whatever I can to win. Growing up in the ghetto, everything is competition, but they can't get everybody. So whoever gets out gets the reward. He's talking about football, but it speaks so much to his almost psychological processes out on the field, right? Okay, we're going into BOZE conspiracy land here for a minute, all right? I feel like after hearing a couple of interviews of how he talks about his football career, I think that Suge was basically getting triggered on the field, okay? I'm gonna interject a little bit of my own personal experience. As many of you know, I have PTSD and I've been in therapy for it for a very, very long time. I've gotten significantly better. It's crazy. Like a couple years ago, I was unwell and I had no idea. When you have PTSD, it's a common misconception that you have these like vivid flashbacks, like in the movies. It's like you're just sitting there and they get blown back in time and there's visuals and stuff. It's not like that. It's like emotionally you get blown back into that time. Like if you have severe abandonment issues and a friend or a significant other basically threatens to leave, or let's say they really do walk out, you might emotionally go back to a time 5 years old when somebody left you for the first time. And that's why it's so intense when you have PTSD, because that's what a flashback is. It's an emotional flashback. When he says that he's in this competition and he wants to hurt these people, it's almost like he's way back in time, thinking about a time that he had to protect himself. And being out on the field, it's like, you're trying to stop me. You're trying to stop me from winning. You're trying to stop me from surviving. And I will survive by any means necessary. That's just the way it sounds to me. Like if I read a little something, I'm like, that sounds like PTSD talk to me. Because back in the day, I didn't know I had PTSD. I'd be waking up in the morning, somebody might say something crazy to me, and triggers me into the past, and I wake up, I'm like, oh, where's the enemy? Who are we fighting? What are we doing? It's pretty intense. Obviously it's not a good idea to point fingers at, well, I think this person has this diagnosis, but look, you don't think Suge had a little PTSD? Growing up after the Watts riot, seeing people killed right in front of him, sure, he might have gotten hardened later as a defense mechanism, but when that fear sets in, we learn how to protect ourselves from that fear ever happening again. But it doesn't ever fully go away. It just gets covered up with new defense mechanisms. And I think that his defense mechanism was violence and intimidation. It worked for him for many years and he had no repercussions. The whole high school was calling him a sweet boy. So why would he stop? His coach would later say he was not a problematic guy at all. He had a job where he worked weekends as a security guard. He liked to listen to R&B and soul music. Sometimes he would even rap a little bit, and there's actually a video where all of his friends were just supporting him. I'm Suge Knight. Okay, I don't have to do that. I just play the video. was going well for him. And in 1987, he was offered a contract with the 49ers. Bro, this is huge. There's actually something really amazing to me about Suge Knight's backstory, because like, think about it. He grew up in a really rough neighborhood, and ultimately he becomes this multi-million-dollar rap executive. But even before that, he gets offered a contract with the 49ers. Like, he was getting opportunities that people could only dream of. However, even though he hid that violent side really well, it ultimately did come out when he got arrested. He was actually accused of shooting a guy in Las Vegas. And when the 49ers heard about this, they cut the opportunity. He didn't get to join, and he was charged with attempted murder and grand theft auto. He pleaded guilty and somehow only got 3 years of probation, but Suge was pretty upset about this. I'm not sure if Suge ever learned to deal with his emotions outside of violence, but people said he was so upset by this opportunity. But then he went to Los Angeles and tried out for the Rams, and he got that. Like, this is what I'm talking about. I don't know what it is. It's like success just follows this man. Like, how do I sign up for that? I guess my channel is doing pretty good. Look, I feel like life was going pretty well for Suge. I mean, at least he was on the right track, right? One day he skips practice with the Rams and shows up to his on and off again girlfriend, Sharitha Golden's house. Sharitha said he wasn't invited. He just showed up one day, pulls up to the front, and he says, "Sharitha, get in the car." And Sharitha gets in the car because, even though people think he's Sugar Bear football, the people that know him behind the scenes know that at this point, he's a scary mother. Okay, he is. He just straight up is. Sharitha and him were going through a rough patch, but she still gets in the car. He has a very calm demeanor about him, but he ends up reaching in the back and pulling out a pair of scissors. He brought those scissors there. Gangsters don't just run around with a pair of scissors, okay? He doesn't need the scissors. He has a gun. So, in my opinion, he brought those scissors because he knew what he was gonna do. He pulled Sharitha's ponytail down and pulled her hard down by her hair, and he began to cut her ponytail off. When people do this to women, it's a form of humiliation, but it's also saying, I can take your beauty away. I can make men not look at you anymore. I own you. I control you. I control your beauty. This is a terrifying situation. It's not, you don't take a pair of scissors and just snip a ponytail off clean. It involves a lot of force, holding her down and snipping and snipping and snipping until it comes off all the way. I can only imagine the fear and the upset that she was feeling in that moment. She got away safely and ended up filing a restraining order against him. But I guess they had some kind of trauma bond or something like that, because they ended up getting married later on in the 80s. I don't know. Sharitha, I don't know how everything keeps lining up for this dude. I swear, lose the opportunity with the 49ers. Man, this fucking sucks. Well, I guess I'll just join the Rams. What the? But them getting married is later in the story. I mean, when he got that restraining order filed against him, especially after he pled guilty to the other charges, the Rams, they were done with him too. And he just went into being a bodyguard full time. Eventually, he kind of becomes a bodyguard for DOC after driving his mom around a whole lot. The DOC was a dude that co-wrote a lot of NWA songs when they were at the height of everything. Now, there's a whole lot of things that were going on between West Coast and East Coast hip hop, and as far as just the rap music boom around the 80s, but this video is about Suge Knight, so, we'll kind of cut to the chase with some of it. I'll give you the footnotes and let you know how we got here. But remember I mentioned NWA? Well, they kind of kicked things off for us. They launched in 87 and blew up pretty fast. I mean, you probably know about Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, Ice Cube. I mean, those people all started with NWA. Well, over the years, they achieved insane success, and the money was flowing in. Well, it was flowing in, but it wasn't necessarily flowing into the pockets of all the members. A lot of seedy business guys got involved with it, and they were funneling money into their own pockets. And Ice Cube was one of the first people to figure this out, and he left the label in 1989. Well, word got out that Ice Cube is leaving because of money issues, and that kind of perks up everyone else's ear about things they'd been hearing over the years, and they're like, oh, they messing with the money. They messing with the money. I get it, especially when these people are touring, they got their faces on billboards, they're doing radio shows. Like, you better pay me what I'm worth. I remember hearing the TLC, the ladies that did No Scrubs, Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls, they were so famous. I mean, this is years later. I'm just giving you a reference. They came out later and said their salary was like $50,000 a year. Can you imagine being that famous and making $50,000 a year? You can't go outside. So anyways, all that to say, I don't know what their contracts look like. I don't know what kind of money they were making, but they weren't happy with it. But his whole life, he's always also had this other little facade to hide behind. I mean, whether it's the football star, the very sweet family man, now it's like, okay, I need the rap label executive title. So he's kind of just a talent manager, but he wants more. Like I said, you and I, we don't really know what all happened behind the scenes, but people in the industry did. And they knew that Suge was responsible. Look, at this point, we don't even know how many people Suge Knight has killed. Okay? All right, allegedly. But I'm like, come on. So DOC and Suge, they kind of split off and they worked with a lawyer to look over all the finances. And they realized, yeah, they were stealing money. They were stealing a lot of money. And they wanted to leave. But there was one problem. All of these guys were stuck in contracts and there was no possible. Suge got them out of the contracts. We don't know what the fuck he did, but he got everybody out of the contracts. Somehow Suge said, I'll be right back, folks. He left, he met up with the executives, Eazy-E and his little buddies, and he came back and suddenly DOC and Dre were out of their contracts. And the only thing left to do now is to make their own rap label. They've got a whole slew of really talented people that already have some image in the public eye. They just need to form their own thing. And look, this is Suge's dream, okay? I don't know if he ever wanted to be a football star. I don't think he wanted to just be a bodyguard. But you know that video of him rapping earlier and how he always was listening to R&B and soul music? The guy was really into music. So now here's an opportunity for him to be in the rap scene and also a high-level executive making a whole bunch of money. He just cracked open the books with the lawyer so he knows what's possible. This is his dream. And personally, I think Suge was really excited. But he's a gangster, so he's not gonna say, guys, I'm really excited about this label we're about to start. They toyed with a few names. At first, I think they were gonna call it Future Shock Records. It's not hitting as hard, right? And they knew that too. So then they played with Death Row Records. And then they come to find out that there was like a trademark that was owned by some other guy. Suddenly, Suge Knight paid him a visit and he said, you guys can have this trademark. I mean, this is a pattern. It's also crazy to me that Suge was just running around intimidating people, beating them up. Listen, guys, I feel like some of you guys that watch my channel, you probably want me to go a little bit harder on this, but the man gets out in a couple of years, okay? And also, listen, if you're leaving any comments on the video, just use a VPN. This isn't an ad. There's not an ad coming up after this. I'm just saying, like, for your own protection, safety, maybe use like a little VPN, say you're in New Zealand or something like that, and just watch your back, okay? So they get the name and Death Row Records is born. It was a good name. It worked. Next, they need money. They got cash injections from a few places. On one hand, Suge knew a bunch of drug dealers that wanted to kind of put their money somewhere and possibly invest it, so it was perfect. Lots and lots and lots of seedy characters invested their money into Death Row. They had a couple of big business investors too, like the Harrises. Michael Harris and his wife Lydia Harris. Most people in the history books kind of write Lydia off as just a wife, but she was very instrumental in getting things going in Death Row Records. And then the last way that they got cash was Suge decided to start a collections agency. The first debts that Suge felt were owed to him were from Robert Van Winkle. Well, they were owed to one of his associates, a writer named Chocolate. Mr. Van Winkle was enjoying his lunch in sunny Los Angeles, California at a restaurant called The Palms. All of a sudden, both of his bodyguards were pushed aside. Now, Mr. Winkle, who you might actually know as Vanilla Ice, recently had bodyguards because the explosive hit single he had called Ice Ice Baby. Suge felt like Vanilla Ice owed one of his associates money because Mario Johnson, the guy that I told you his name was Chocolate earlier, Mario said that he was actually the one that wrote Ice Ice Baby.
Every song I did on that album, he credited himself. He said he wrote Ice Ice Baby at 16. He didn't write no parts of that song.
Suge's whole thing is he basically rides for his associates. I mean, he wasn't in the gangs growing up, but he kind of has that mentality. If I fight for my people, I get more respect, I get more power. And on top of that, that dude owes me money. And look, I'm just gonna say it, okay? Suge was totally down to bully Vanilla Ice, all right? Because one, he was a white dude. Two, he was from Florida. I mean, originally from Dallas, but he ended up moving to Miami. And three, he felt like he owed one of his associates money. He's like, yeah, cut and dry. Let's go get this mother. Vanilla didn't know who this guy was off the bat, and he was so scared. But let's hear it from Mr. Winkle himself. I'm sorry, I can't stop calling him Mr. Winkle. I just think it's so funny.
And all of a sudden, these huge guys who looked like a football team showed up. You know, it was very intimidating to see these guys. They were bigger than my bodyguards, you know, and a bunch of them. And they pretty much grabbed my bodyguard and pulled him out and sat down next to me right there and just started talking to me. How you doing?
Uninvited.
Totally uninvited. I didn't even know him.
See him again?
Sure did. Saw him again a few months later. He did the same thing, just kind of showed up to me, said hi, and then left. And still thinking, well, wow, this guy knows where I'm at all times. How does he know where I'm at? You know?
This is Suge's game. This is the textbook intimidation kind of bully game. It's just what he does.
Van Winkle describes a terrifying night in his suite at a Beverly Hills hotel when he says Suge Knight showed up with 6 other men.
Roughed one of my bodyguards up. They roughed everybody else in my whole entourage up.
Roughed him
Suge took me out on the balcony, started talking to me personally.
On the balcony.
On the balcony.
High above.
Look, he said that Suge came in and beat up all of his bodyguards, then took him out to the balcony, and then Suge's version of events is
that it was all very friendly.
He agreed to everything. It wasn't a problem.
We just had to do a little bit of business.
Like 15 floors. He had me look over the edge, show me how high I was up there.
Were you scared?
I needed to wear a diaper on that day. I was very scared.
On the balcony, Van Winkle says Suge Knight told him to sign over points from the song to a man named Mario Lavelle Johnson.
Mario.
Who is Mario Lavelle Johnson? His name is listed.
That's the guy that Suge Knight brought over there.
That's Chocolate.
An acquaintance of mine that had nothing to do with that song.
Oh.
You signed over the rights?
Signed over the rights to him.
He's still mad about it. So I dug into this a little bit and I looked up Mario's songwriting history because I wanted to see, like, what else has he written? Are there similarities? You know, he wrote previously for Ice Cube, so was Ice Ice Baby originally for Ice Cube? You know, I had questions, and honestly, my questions weren't really answered. To this day, it's still a mystery. I wonder, do you think that Chocolate wrote it, or you think Vanilla Ice wrote it? I don't know.
So that Suge and them could get paid for it.
So Mario Lavelle Johnson didn't write that song?
No way.
How much were those points worth?
About $4 million, $3 million, anywhere between there.
Oh my
God.
God.
$4 million.
$4 million. That sounds like a good chunk of money to start a record label. Either way, now we got cash, we got talent, and we have a record label. Well, they also had to kind of create this parent company called Godfather Entertainment. They solicited this guy named Harry Harris. His wife was really instrumental in getting things going for the business, but her husband was in jail. He invested his money hoping that when he got out of jail, he would have a legitimate business. It was drug money. In the rap industry, Death Row launches with Dr. Dre, who already had a name from being in NWA, and also this newcomer on the scene, Calvin. See, Calvin was a guy who was convicted of cocaine possession back in the 90s when some older guys in jail kind of pushed him into being a rapper. And I guess he was like, okay, like he had a skill for it, and they recognized that, and they were like, dude, you should really hone in from that. Okay, I'm sure that the gangsters in jail didn't say, dude, you should really hone in on that. That's me. That's my interpretation of events, okay? So when Calvin gets out of jail, he's friends with Warren G, who happens to be Dr. Dre's half-brother. So Warren G brings Calvin into the studio, and Dr. Dre's looking at this dude. He's like super, super skinny. He's got like a real mellow tone. But when he's rapping, He's saying the most messed up stuff ever. I mean, he's talking about street life, but he's talking about it like really calm, cool, and collected. They really, really liked what would soon be Snoop Dogg's style. They said that he had this kind of smoothness and calmness to his rapping while saying really, really scary stuff, and they thought it made it even scarier. Also, Snoop later went on to say that part of his style was influenced from the 70s. He said people that, grew up listening to music in the 60s and 70s, they had a little bit of flavor to it. And I mean, it's true. When you listen to Snoop Dogg's music, you can kind of hear it. So he had this really, really interesting edge to him, and Death Row Records went all in on him. So NWA really laid the groundwork for West Coast hip hop and a lot of hip hop in general to take off. I mean, people were able to see that it makes money, and it was everywhere. So Dre's album explodes, The Chronic explodes. What was that first album? The Dog Father? Was that his first album? Oh, I'm sorry. It was Doggy Style. That was Snoop's original album. All of these blow up. They love this style, and people are hungry for more because this hasn't really happened before. Like, y'all heard the song Nothing But a G Thing before. That song was #2 on the Billboard Hot 100. I mean, look, they started taking black folk music seriously like in the past couple of decades, but the hip hop, the rap, we're here, ladies and gentlemen. This was such an exciting time for music. But even though Snoop had been to jail before and he grew up in a pretty dangerous environment, now he thinks he's made it out. He's got money, he's got people to protect him, he's famous now, but also he's got Suge Knight breathing down his back, trying to control everything that he does. See, Suge didn't really trust Snoop. He didn't like his attitude. He felt like he couldn't control him. And I mean, look, if you look at Snoop's career over the years, Snoop just kind of does whatever he wanted. And this is how Calvin was when he first joined the label. When people feel like they can't control you, they'll put a target on your back. And that's exactly what he did. It was most of the time in subtle ways, but it kind of culminated into this one really scary plane ride for Snoop.
So normally I got 2 security with me that fly on a private plane. What is Suge got his homies, Pac got his security. We get to the private plane, Suge like, they can't go.
Yep. His bodyguards, he's saying that his security can't come on the plane with him.
Security like, all right, well, come on with us, dog. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna stay down.
Ooh.
I'm ride with them.
Ooh.
Like, this either the moment you gonna kill me,
yeah,
and we gonna get some clarity in this air.
He said, we gonna do what we gonna do.
We got a 5.5-hour flight. I ain't got no security. You ain't feeling me right now.
Ooh.
So I sit down, and I'm like,
bro, let me just say, this would not be me. I would have said, my boy's leaving, my bodyguard's leaving, so I'm gonna just go with them. I'll catch y'all wherever we go.
They still don't say nothing to me. Now we finna take off. I'm like, all right, I see what's finna happen. I've been around these, I know how they get down. I grab me a knife and a fork, get my blanket, 5.5 hours like this. Sit in the back of the plane, all the way in the back. I'm the last seat. So somebody gonna get killed. If I'm gonna get killed, somebody dying with me.
I know I've just been telling the story and talking a bit about who all these characters are, but I want to remind you, there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes that were kept very, very private. To this point, do you think that Suge has significantly hurt anyone or taken the lives of others? I'll say this. Some people reported that when they were working for Suge Knight, one of their regular jobs was to clean blood and mess out of Suge's office. He would just leave and say, clean it up. We don't know who a lot of those people are. We don't know a lot of what their story is. We don't know a lot of what happened in those rooms. So technically, I can't go into detail. I can't tell you everything. But Snoop was terrified on that plane because, like he said, he knows how these people get down. He knows what happens. He was on the plane with a fork and knife. My baby Calvin, he was on the plane. He said, look, I'm gonna get somebody before I go out. You motherfuckers ain't getting me. But Snoop is still here to this day. However, there was another talent that signed on to death row that would become one of the biggest sensations of the 90s.
Are you ready?
There's a lot of footage of Tupac when he was younger, and it's so interesting because he seems like a really deep thinker, and he's able to articulate these things very, very clearly, and people were just fascinated by him even from a young age. This then kind of translated, I think, into writing lyrics and rapping, and he kind of started off having a nice little career in the music industry until, while he was on tour, he was accused of sexual abuse. He later went to trial and denied all of the charges, but Death Row Records didn't care. They said, well, there's a rapper in there that could be making us a bunch of money, and right now he needs us. He needs somebody. He needs something. So he was on a multi-million-dollar bail. And Suge came in and talked to Tupac. He made friendly with him, and he gave him a really great offer. He basically told him they would pay his bail, they'd get him out, they'd help him with legal counsel, and they were going to help pay for his mother's home. I think it was in foreclosure, or she was at risk of being put out. I don't know if, the legal asset or just getting him out of there and possibly giving him a career was a big appeal, but to lean on, hey, we're going to take care of your mom too. That tapped into something like, we are gonna be your family. We're gonna take care of you, and we're gonna take care of your people. You can trust us. You can trust me. Remember, Suge, aka Sugar Bear, he's got this soft side that he's able to lean into for people. Is it real? No, because he's out here allegedly killing people, okay? But I think that he was able to give this air of soft but very protective, and as long as you're loyal to him, he will bend over backwards for you, and he will do things that other people are not willing to do. Now, Tupac had already released a few albums. I think some of them were even under Interscope, which is a huge label, but a lot of these albums didn't reach prominence until after his passing. So he already had quite a bit of popularity, and Suge knew that he could essentially take advantage of that and make money off of it. I mean, that's why I said I don't think it was huge that he was gonna get him out of jail and give him this, record label deal, because he kind of already had that. I think it was helping his mom that really made him sign the deal. So Tupac starts working with Death Row Records, and he starts to work on All Eyes on Me. This is, this isn't really what people consider his magnum opus. His previous albums, people said, were even better. But the distribution and the climate of where hip hop was at the time, it just really elevated this. Also, I'm not gonna lie, it was bumping. The music was bumping. Hey, to this day, y'all know if you still bumping Pac, it's probably All Eyes on Me. I mean, all the albums are pretty good, but that was it. That was the one. So All Eyes on Me counted as a double album. He was only required to put out 3 albums at Death Row Records, and I don't know how it happened, but this was supposedly a double album, and afterwards he would only have 1 left. However, Tupac was now the biggest star on Death Row Records. I mean, we all know and love Dr. Dre and Snoop decades here later, but in the 90s, the Tupac fandom was going crazy. So even though his previous albums were kind of more socio-political, when he goes into the world of Death Row Records, it's way more like gang life, family, like the East Coast and West Coast feud was really, really amplified. Here's something else too. You guys know how people always say Tupac and Biggie were pawns in the East Coast and West Coast rivalry. They were friends before this. They were friends. A lot of y'all probably already know that because they put out songs together. There was House of Pain. They put out another single together. They met in like 93 and they were boys. And this weird coastal rivalry just kind of made them turn against each other because that's what their families were essentially doing. Right now, Tupac is a huge star. His album is #1 on the Billboard charts. He's winning awards. He was 9 times certified platinum. I mean, look, you guys remember the song California Love? It was huge. We still hear that song all the time to this day. But on September 7th in 1996, there was a lot going on in Tupac's world. I feel like when people live this type of lifestyle, the only way that you can get through it is by hardening yourself, by being essentially fearless. But I'm assuming here, I feel like there might be a level of paranoia that comes with it too. Can you imagine living in a world where there's dozens of people that want to kill you? Whether it's because of an East Coast, West Coast rivalry, whether it's because your contract is almost up soon. He never knew what was gonna happen. He just didn't feel safe. I mean, look, there's hitmen that are coming out of the woodwork. There's people that just straight up don't like them. I mean, they got into a fight on September 7th at an award show, right? They're beating somebody up. Suge's beating somebody up. These kind of things were happening all the time. In this lifestyle, you could go from having fun with your friends to just getting socked in the back of the head or shot at any moment. But on this particular day, on September 7th, like I said, Suge and Tupac had gone to an award show and they got into another fight with another rival. These people were everywhere. I mean, West Coast people had to go to New York sometimes. New York people had to come to the West Coast. It was just a thing. And it seems like there were enemies at every turn. They were at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and a guy named Orlando Anderson was involved. He's getting beat up by Suge Knight, Tupac swinging on him too. He might have got a couple hits in. It's another rival. I just cannot imagine living like this, especially when you're at these award shows. The bodyguards aren't allowed to come into the areas with the talent. It's just the talent and the executives. They feel like the bodyguards will be networking with other musicians and artists trying to find future work. So, when Tupac is in those areas, he's really just there on his own and with Suge. But I feel like he and Suge didn't really trust each other at this point. When Suge is constantly displaying how much of a violent person he is, I don't know if Pac fully trusted him. They leave the venue and Suge is still putting on his good face of like, I got you, Tupac. I'm your protector. I'll take care of you. But out of nowhere, somebody pulls up and they shot Tupac.
Tupac Shakur is in critical condition after 2 rounds of surgery.
The rapper was shot inside of a BMW while stopped at a red light on Koval and Flamingo.
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business. He was 25.
I feel like there's kind of a disconnect sometimes with people in gang violence. But this was a horrifying situation. I mean, whether you think Suge was involved, whether you think it was an East Coast, West Coast rivalry, or even if you're somebody that doesn't care he died because of his assault conviction, this is an important part of the story because everyone knew something like this was going to happen. And it did. It changed the course of everything. A lot of people, especially the media, immediately chalk this up to East Coast, West Coast. But man, I did some digging and I really don't know. Some people even questioned Suge and they said, was he defiant? Did he not want to re-sign with the label again? Because look, this guy to Suge was a cash cow. He probably wasn't just going to let him go. But would he have him killed as punishment, retaliation? Could it have been the guy that was involved with the MGM Grand? Well, that guy actually ended up passing away in an unrelated shooting 2 years later. But just 6 months after Tupac passed, they took Biggie too. It was like these guys were symbolic of East Coast and West Coast rap. They thought, well, you did it to me, I'm gonna do it to you. I think if that's true, if that's really true, I don't think anyone expected the great loss that we even kind of feel today. There was this extreme sadness that came from both sides. I really think this was a turning point for the other people on Death Row Records, like Dre and Snoop. They already knew that they didn't want to be involved in this gang shit. Like, they didn't really want this. Like, they wanted a family. They wanted to feel protected. They wanted the fame. They wanted the money, the cars. But they don't want to see people that they consider their brothers dying. Sometimes people don't even want to see their enemies dying. This just basically, it got really, really sad. It got it got sad. Well, Dr. Dre had already started planning his exit because a few months prior to this, in March, he wanted to get out of his contract with Death Row Records. He was pretty tied up into it, but he said, look, I don't want your money. I don't care about the libraries, the songs, or whatever. I just want out. They said that it was for contract disagreements, but later we kind of found out it was for a lot of the gang-related activity. These people, here's the thing. These folks had worked so hard on their craft, their talent, understanding the music, making music for other people, learning the business deals and things. They had worked too hard and gotten out of bad lifestyles they were raised in for it all to be thrown away by them repeating the trauma cycle. And Dre had tried to get out of his contract months prior, and then when Tupac and Biggie happened, I mean, it seems like he made the right decision. Dude, even MC Hammer had joined the label back in '95, and he thought he was coming in on a good deal. You know, we got money, family, protection, everything's good. I'm doing a little MC Hammer dance. About a year later, he didn't even release any albums. After Pac died, he said, yo, I'm good on all this. I'm good. See, nobody wanted this life. Nobody wanted to get caught up in Suge Knight's trauma, essentially. He was really just repeating a cycle that he never grew out of. But Dr. Dre went off and decided to start his own label. This is a problem because you remember when I said earlier that when Suge Knight was out on the football field, he saw everyone as competition. He saw everyone as the enemy. And his goal was always to destroy and dominate the enemy. Now that Dr. Dre has started Aftermath Records, he has become the enemy. He knows a lot of people in the industry. He knows how to get things started. He's so talented. He has several investors, but he needs more talent. Now we're getting to the very interesting part of the story. Dr. Dre ends up hearing the tape of this guy that's somewhere in the Midwest. Look, we done with the East Coast. We done with the West Coast. Let's just sit it right in the middle. And this guy was very strange. He grew up with this narcissistic mom in a pretty poor area, and he got into rap. He was a white guy, but he got into rap, and that's how he expressed his feelings. He had this alter ego that was a crazy, violent guy named Slim Shady. Dr. Dre hears this guy's mixtape, and he says, yo, y'all need to find this motherfucker right now. Of course, this is Marshall Mathers, the man that we now know as Eminem. Eminem was raised by his mom after his dad abandoned them, and his mom had a lot of mental issues. I'm pretty sure Debbie was suing him years later. Man, y'all be hearing of people's parents suing them? That is cold. That's just stone cold. Eminem's mom was wild, okay? She was just a little gone after their dad left. So he develops this crazy alter ego that basically, listen, just wants to kill Debbie. But he doesn't. He just releases it through music, and it comes up with this really interesting character. And Dr. Dre recognizes this, and because he makes beats and he just knows what voices work well over music, he had to get Eminem. Eminem was already making music over in Detroit, and he pulled him in. Also, I don't know if you know this, but Eminem briefly had a stint where he was really into breakdancing.
Let's serve him up. He took you to the floor. Oh!
So Dr. Dre's label releases Eminem's The Slim Shady LP. It had the track My Name Is. And when this came out, look, let's just give it what it is. People in the rap industry respected, oh, this is actually pretty good. And now, all of a sudden, the white folks are interested in rap. Eminem was rapping about coming from a trailer park, coming in Detroit, coming in having a crazy mom. And he just had this really interesting tone that people loved. I still remember the first time that I heard My Name Is, and I was like, well, golly, what is this? I like this. Play that again. It really worked to both crowds, and it was a huge success. Eminem was so successful, and Dre didn't want to bind him to anything. Eminem put out his own label called Shady Records around like late 1999. And he's doing so well. Dre had gotten rid of all the gang stuff, and he's just trying to run a business. Dre is like, can y'all please leave me alone? Okay, leave me alone. And of course, Suge can't have that. Suge can't have somebody leaving him. Suge can't have somebody leaving him and being successful, and he certainly can't have somebody being more successful than him. Death Row Records had a bad reputation at this point. It was on the decline. Sponsors didn't want to work with them. People didn't want to invite them to award shows because they thought that they were bad news and there was going to be fights all the time. It was just on the decline. So Suge felt like he needed to get rid of Eminem. By the media's accounts, they say that he made 2 attempts on Eminem's life. But Eminem wasn't anything like Vanilla Ice. See, people had already warned him about Suge Knight and really what his game was. So Eminem played it safe. The first time was in 2001 at the Source Awards. Remember when I told you earlier that bodyguards couldn't really go into talent areas at award shows? Well, Suge felt like if he sent enough people, they would be able to get through. Now, do I think that he was gonna just straight up kill him at the award show? I don't know. Some people seem to think so, but either way, Suge had people flooding the awards show looking for Eminem. They literally said, "We're here to strong arm Eminem." I think they were maybe just trying to scare him, or maybe they were gonna do something after the show. But either way, Dre was ready. He said, "Look, I know how these people play. I'm gonna give you my bodyguards. You gonna have your bodyguards, and you just gonna sit right in the middle of them." And they were trying to get to Eminem. They couldn't get to him. They couldn't. So then, years later, they try again in Hawaii. I'm not kidding. Bro, in Hawaii, Suge sent 50 guys to Hawaii to try to intimidate Eminem. Now, see, people say that these were attempts on Eminem's life, but I just don't think that he's gonna send a crowd of 50 people to go kill him. Maybe try to scare him or rough him up, because that was, Suge's outward tactic. But after these 2 attempts to either kill Eminem or just intimidate him, Eminem is so over this guy. I feel like maybe he had a little confidence too at this point, because he had survived and, gotten away cleanly from these 2 incidents. They were definitely, at the very least, gonna try to rough him up. I mean, Suge was known for doing stuff and then paying off the police or paying off anybody. Now, you remember earlier, I said Eminem had started his own label, Shady Records. Well, Dre and Eminem went in on a joint venture with another artist. They had warned their new artist about Suge Knight. But this guy, he wasn't afraid to die. Just a few years prior, he had been shot 9 times at close range and survived. He had the will to live, and he wasn't afraid of anything. God just gave him a new lease on life. Then Dre and him gave him a record deal and a budget. He was not gonna let some old dude get up in his face talking all this mess. I mean, look, it's 50 Cent. See, Curtis Jackson had a pretty interesting life. He was selling drugs back when he was 12 years old. He was getting away with it for most of his life. He didn't really serve any jail time. And if you didn't know, 50 Cent is a notorious internet troll. Wait. Before I get into this backstory, can we just fast forward for a minute so I can just tell you 2 of my favorite 50 Cent moments. So years into his success, 50 Cent goes in on this cognac company with a partner. The partner ends up stealing money from him. Well, when 50 finds this out, he's not a gangster anymore. He's old. Well, I mean, I guess he still kind of is, but he's not going to go put on a hit on him or nothing. He takes the legal method to get his money back. But the guy that he was suing that stole money from him, he only had a limited amount of money. So 50 said, "Cool, I'm going to take your house." And when he took the man's home, he posted this on Instagram. He actually posted this. Rapper and entrepreneur 50 Cent's former employee stole $6.2 million from his liquor brand, Cognac. After winning the lawsuit, 50 Cent is now seizing all of his assets, including properties, bank accounts, and cars. When 50 took the man's house, he literally said to him, "I need you on my house, man." The caption of this that he posted on Instagram, this is real. It said, "I think I'm gonna put epoxy floors in this place. I'm gonna keep it and his family pictures around, as like a little theme for the place. LOL." He really wrote the LOL, okay? He used to be in a relationship with Chelsea Handler. You know what? Bring back this celebrity couple. Bring them back. Wait, one more, because this man is just so unserious. One time, 50 Cent had a big feud with Fat Joe because he was saying that his music was horrible, and he actually put this up online.
What's up? This is 50 Cent. I just want to thank everybody for showing their support and get well messages. I got on this50.com. Yesterday, I listened to Fat Joe's record. It hurt me. And I told you people not to listen to his music.
Dude, this man is so unserious. He really is. Patrick CC does a really, really good video on this. It's called The Victims of 50 Cent, where he just runs through a timeline of 50 Cent trolling people. This man is so unserious. But let's go back to the 2000s. See, Curtis Jackson, like I said, he had a pretty tough life, but back when he was 25 in early 2000, he was shot at close range 9 times by somebody that was trying to kill him. And boy, he survived. It was a life-changing moment for him. I mean, one, he processed it as, okay, maybe I'm supposed to do something big. Maybe I'm not supposed to die. He had a second chance at life. He had survived miraculously, and it instilled almost this fearlessness in him. You know, all the people involved in the Death Row Records story, they had committed violence. They had been beat up themselves. They might have been involved in other murders, maybe, who knows. Look, y'all, I'm trying to survive out here, okay? So allegedly everything. But in my opinion, the combination of 50 Cent having faced death and also having this who cares attitude was just not something that I think Suge was used to. So 50 Cent is getting ready for his big break. But on the other end, we have Suge Knight, who felt like he came in a little late trying to take out Eminem. And now he hears about this up-and-coming rapper, 50 Cent, that Dre and M really believe in, and he decides he needs to get into his head quickly. So he shows up on his first big music video shoot. It was for the music video in the club. So on this day, everybody's on set, everybody's doing their thing. We got hair, makeup, set design. Everybody is working hard to put this big video together. And Suge finds out the location. He shows up with a big group of 30 dudes. All these vans start pulling up, these dudes hop out, and they're like, Suge's here, Suge's here. And Suge walks into the set like he owns it or something, and he's puffing his little cigar, and everybody on set starts clearing out because it's like, why would Suge show up with 30 guys? Not everyone on the set knows what Suge's gonna do or that he plays the intimidation game a lot, but they know that he is a wildly violent man that people don't like coming around because when he shows up, it means trouble. So all these dudes start pouring in, and Suge's at the front smoking his cigar, and everybody clears out of the set except like 3 people. 2 of them probably were nervously inching out. Maybe they didn't want to, be running out with everyone. And the other one was 50 Cent, because it was his shoot day. And Suge walks up to 50 Cent, and he's smoking his cigar. I don't know why I keep holding it like a cigarette. How do you hold a cigar? He's smoking his cigar, and 50 said, "What's up?" Because he knows who Suge is. He's heard Dre and Eminem talking about this for a minute. And Suge just kind of lifts his head up, doesn't say nothing to him. Big crew of dudes behind him. And 50's like, "Can I help you, sir? Excuse me, this is my set. Are you lost?" And the 2 other dudes that stayed around on set, they're like, 50, what are you doing? Because remember, I told you, 50, he already been shot 9 times. He said, what you gonna do? Let's do what you gonna do. I mean, maybe he even knows that he's not gonna come up and do it right here. I don't know. But once again, 50 Cent was fearless. Suge took a few more puffs of the cigar, and without saying anything, he just turned around and left. And then 50 tells everyone, yo, Suge's gone. Come on, let's shoot this video. Everybody comes back on the set, and they're like, hello? Like, are we good? Like, 50, you okay? He said, come on, let's do this video. we on Dre's dollar. We gotta hurry up. They shoot the music video, and In the Club is probably one of the first songs you ever heard from 50 Cent. That song is so big, even the video on YouTube now that I'm recording this video, it has 1.8 billion views. It was massively popular. After this, people were a little nervous. They were rolling out with bulletproof cars, wearing bulletproof vests under anything because they thought that another war was gonna happen. But nothing happened. It was like, wait, all we had to do was kind of call Suge out on the intimidation stuff and he wasn't gonna ramp up? That's it? And 50's just over here just doing his thing, like ready to shoot the music video. Even years later, when he talks about it, it's kind of interesting how he responds. Here's a video where 50 Cent recalls the day that Suge Knight showed up to the set.
He showed up in the club video shoot. He came, it was like, Suge's outside! Suge's outside! Everybody like, he was running, dropping shit, like, man, everybody going, I'm in front of the
Because they were scared. Is it just me or is everyone else looking a little nervous? But 50 just looks like he's salivating to talk about this.
like this. Everybody like, whoa! Running. It was just gone.
So now, Suge's violent reputation is kind of sinking, and there was another really big blow to Death Row Records. Do you guys remember earlier when I said that guy Harry invested trying to legitimize his money while he was in jail? Well, his wife, Lydia Harris, kind of served as the medium between the guy in jail and Death Row Records. She also was just kind of like a mom to everybody at the label. She was doing business deals, she was taking care of people, she was liaisoning between her husband in jail, controlling the money. She was a really big piece in this. But eventually, when Death Row started making money, they just cast her aside. Suge had a habit of this. Like, if he felt like somebody could be bullied out of something, he would do it. And Lydia was a woman, so he just kind of pushed her aside and acted like she was nothing. Well, years later, when Death Row started making money and she had been pushed out of all of it, she said, no. Not only were my husband and I early investors, but I did so much for you fools, keeping you out of trouble, helping you make money, being the nice, kind face of all this when people were afraid to invest in gangster rap. You ain't gonna do me dirty like this. So Lydia ultimately goes in and ends up suing Death Row Records. She comes out with a judgment of $107 million because she claimed that she was the original vice president of Death Row Records and she never got her cut. So a judge ruled in her favor and she basically bankrupted Suge Knight. I mean, there's a clip of somebody finding Suge Knight's storage locker in Storage Wars. He lost everything after this judgment. There was no way to hide his money from the government. I'm sure he put something aside, but it wasn't much. The government came in and took everything and she got paid. Later on, there's reports of the untouchable Suge Knight getting shot in the leg, beat up, knocked out cold at different events. His reputation was under fire. Nobody was that scared of him anymore. By the late 2000s, Suge's getting beat up left and right. There was one report where he was at a nightclub and he's yelling in somebody's face, I want my money, I want my money. And the guy, who's apparently a barber, just took him out and he was out cold for about 3 minutes. Next, he's getting knocked out by somebody's manager. I mean, his reputation is in the gutter. Then in 2009, all of the assets of Death Row Records got auctioned off for $18 million. The entire library of Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, everybody. It was just gone in a big bundle to this random company. Everything was going downhill for a while, but it really came to a head in January of 2015. So Ice Cube and Dr. Dre had gotten back together to work on the movie Straight Outta Compton. Like I said, Ice Cube and Dr. Dre, they were in NWA with Eazy-E and just started the whole big hip-hop movement. Eazy-E had ultimately passed away and they wanted to make a movie about everything that happened and dedicate it to Eazy-E. Obviously, Suge Knight is a big part of this story, so they had somebody playing Suge Knight that wasn't Suge, and he was pretty mad that he wasn't involved in the project at all, but he also had this weird sense of entitlement around it all. So he shows up to the set when they're filming this promotional thing, and people say, you can't come in. Because like I said, Suge Knight is always trouble. Dr. Dre even had a restraining order against him. Like, look, they're not doing this gang stuff anymore. They're running a business and going through legal measures. Sir, I have a restraining order against you. Get off the set. It was that easy. Suge likes to do this thing where he acts like everything's all cool. He talks really calm, cool, and collected. But if you know what he's about, you don't trust him. I mean, even the way he talks about his former colleagues that don't like him, he says stuff like, nah, we were cool. I don't know why the media likes to portray it that way. He kind of just lies through his teeth. Well, on this day, he pulled up in his truck and he wants to be let in. He wants to reconnect with them for some reason, probably because he had lost all of his power and they had retained theirs. After all, they were the talented people making the music. He was just the greedy executive behind the scenes, and he wanted them back. Well, his friend Terry Carter supposedly had plans to kind of reignite the fuse and maybe make him friends with Dre again. And I guess Suge and Terry had had conversations about this prior, and so when he showed up to set, he expected Terry to work a little magic for him. I mean, Suge was incredibly entitled. So he starts talking to them, trying to let him come in, and they're just not budging. Sloan comes up and they're arguing. He's hitting the truck. Suge had pulled back a few feet and just kind of put the car in park. It was like a, what are you going to do next type of move. And Sloan wasn't going back down either, because now he was the protector of these people. That was the role that Suge used to have. People thought that Suge might go back to his old ways, get out of the car, rough him up, beat him up, something else, but he doesn't. I mean, just a little bit prior to this, he had been shot 6 times. He's been beat up, humiliated. It's all over the press. He's not doing anything right now. When Sloan comes up to the back and Suge puts the car in reverse and just runs over him. He hits the pedal and runs over him. He goes forward, goes back, hits him again, and people aren't sure if he's trying to leave or if he's intentionally trying to run him over. And Terry is in front of the car and Suge runs over him too. Sloan was hospitalized for his injuries, but Terry, the one that was supposed to be his friend, he was killed. Suge tried to argue some type of self-defense, saying that he was scared for his life. Personally, I think Suge was tired of being humiliated and beat up, and he was on high alert. He was a little paranoid from everything that had happened in these past couple of years, that he basically was like, you're not gonna get me again, when he was perfectly safe inside of his vehicle. There was no reason to hit either of these men or run over them several times. This was all captured on video. And one of the most horrifying aspects of it is, you know, these days on social media, things are moderated, you know, violence gets taken down. But a lot of the websites back in the day that picked up on this, you know, Suge Knight running over 2 associates with his vehicle, they blasted it everywhere. And because the websites were in control of what they put up, there was no Instagram to take it down or TikTok, this video was everywhere. Terry was married, and he also had 2 daughters. His oldest daughter heard about it just through a phone call. And afterwards, they had to see this played over and over on TMZ, on hip hop websites, their father's death just right in front of them and right in front of so many people. It's almost like they didn't even have time to grieve before the media captured all of this. And then they go to trial, and y'all know how the trials go. Suge has the audacity to say, I thought I was in danger, even though he was perfectly boxed in a car. That was rage. It was envy, because he was jealous that they were working with the friends that he missed. And it was sad. TMZ published the footage and it was all over the internet. During the trial, they said that Suge made a lot of me statements, only talking about himself, not talking about Sloan or Terry at all, barely even saying their names. It was very, very hard to watch for Terry Carter's family. Ultimately, the judge handed down a 28-year sentence. And look, Suge might actually get out of jail sometime, which is shocking because part of the reason why we hand down a well thought out sentencing is we want to think about what was the nature of the crime, how did they respond to it later, what are their chances of rehabilitation. What do you think Suge Knight's chances of rehabilitation are? Or do you think he's gonna get even more hardened in this round of prison and come back out and start doing the same stuff even worse? He knows how to control people, as long as he has money. But there is one more part of the story. Do you guys remember Harry Harris? The guy that was in jail and his wife was kind of helping him invest his money into the label. Well, Harry had spent over 30 years in jail for an attempted murder charge, drug-related charges. It seemed like he wasn't getting out anytime soon. But he became pretty good friends with Snoop Dogg over the years, and Snoop worked very hard to try to get him pardoned and let out of jail. And it worked. Ultimately, Snoop and Harry partnered up to buy Death Row Records back. And now, Death Row is back in the hands of one of the originals as of 2022. Listen, I know you guys like when I bully murderers, but if this video disappears in 11 years, you know why. I need to be safe.